So the power clean is a relatively simple movement. People tend to overcomplicate learning it and coaching it. But there are a couple of challenges that most of us have to deal with when learning the power clean, which makes it pretty tough. The problem is that when you start bending your elbows, or you have an inefficient pull off the floor, or you miss the jump point, the touch point on your mid-thigh, it tends to screw up the rack. It tends to screw up the height that the bar goes. And then you have a negative feedback loop where you have the bar going lower, you yank the bar harder to try to get it up higher, and then all this stuff happens that makes it worse, and you end up practicing inefficient or just bad technique. So the purpose of this video is going to be to help you focus on the important parts of the clean, get your priorities straight in terms of practicing it, and hopefully help you clean up your pulls and make you a little bit less intimidated about the power clean and the power snatch for that matter. So 2 things you need to be focused on with the clean. The rack is the least important part of doing this movement. So racking the bar, if you've pulled the bar off the floor correctly, if you've touched your mid-thigh, if you've jumped with your arms straight, the rack should be fairly easy to do. And if it's not, you can teach yourself, or you can practice learning the rack later on. So you have to make sure that you are, number 1, jumping with straight arms, and number 2, touching the mid-thigh jump position. If those 2 things are not in place, you're not going to have a good clean, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse the more you practice it. And we're just going to assume the pull off the floor is correct. So setting up with the 5-step setup, having the proper grip, and all that stuff, which you can see in our other videos. But today I want to just focus on the arm pull, and I want to focus on mid-thigh jump position. Those should be the 2 things. Once you've kind of gone through the initial teaching method and you've worked on these a little bit, those are the 2 things that you're going to have to focus on. So let's talk about that for a second. So number 1, if there is any bend in your elbow, when you jump, when you do the explosive hip and knee extension that gets the bar moving up under its own momentum so that you can rack the bar, some amount of that power is going to be leaked by the arm bending. And even if it's just a tiny little bit of arm bend, it affects the trajectory of the bar. It affects the upward movement of the bar and makes it harder to rack. And the thing with that is that it gets worse with more weight. It doesn't get better. So I've heard people say that we'll put a little bit more weight on and it should get rid of that arm bend. That's not the way it works. If you've got a little bit of an arm bend with 65 pounds on the bar, when you put 115, it's going to be more pronounced. So you've got to deal with it early, and you've got to learn a new movement pattern that you're unfamiliar or reluctant to do. So let's talk about that part first. So Bree over here is going to take the bar and she's going to go to the hang position. And a couple of prerequisites here are that the arms are stand up in the hang. Yeah, arms are an internal rotation. All right, this is internal rotation. Triceps are tight. So she's going to squeeze her triceps. She's going to pose her triceps and try to make these muscles tight here. So make sure those 2 things are good. And then something that's helpful is to feel the bar hanging from the shoulder. So if you kind of imagine a point back here on the back of your shoulder, if you just imagine, or not imagine, but if you feel the bar hanging from this spot, then your arms are straps. Your arms are straps and they're chains. They are involved in transferring force, but they're not involved in pulling the bar. All of the pulling happens from the hips and the knees. Obviously, thinking about what your elbows are doing is helpful. You've seen Rip slap people in the bend of the elbow here a bunch. But if you're that's to get you aware of what not to do. Sometimes it'll be helpful to think about what to do. All right, so keep this straight, but pull here. Pull with the shoulders. Feel the weight of the bar in the shoulders. All right, so go to the jump position. And at this point, there's 2 reasons that you're going to want to bend the elbows. Number 1 is that you're trying to rack the bar early. All right, so you're thinking about racking the bar. Number 2 is that you're trying to get the bar to this jump position. So let's talk about that later. First, let's talk about racking the bar early. So if you can jump without bending your elbows, without the rack, then you're good to go. So think of it as like hitting a milestone and then moving to the next step if you can hit that milestone. So we're going to watch Bree jump here. Look at her elbows right here, and I'm looking for those not to bend. Ready? Go. Good. Jump higher. Very nice. Do it again. Good. One more time. Good. All right, and put the bar down. So when you're doing this yourself, it might be hard for you to recognize whether or not your elbows are bending. So in those instances, a camera directly in front of you might be helpful. Maybe put it on slow motion and watch what the elbows are doing when you're jumping. You're gonna have to learn what it feels like to jump with straight elbows, but initially, it might be useful to get some visual feedback to see what's going on. If you can do the jump with straight elbows, you're good, all right? All you have to do is not mess it up from there, all right? So get yourself jumping with straight elbows and practice that movement. Practice it a bunch. In other words, don't move on to racking the bar until that movement pattern, jumping with straight arms, is ingrained, all right? And that's the important part here. Since you were a tiny little child, anytime that you wanted to lift something up and put it on, carry it and put it on your shoulders or whatever, you have bent your elbows to do that. So this might be the first time that you've ever lifted something quickly for sure, and put it on your shoulders and not bent your elbows, right? So if you understand what I'm saying, it's that you have an ingrained movement pattern. An ingrained movement pattern is to yank things with your elbows, and that's what we're trying to undo. So you have to get more correct reps than incorrect reps. Anytime you practice the wrong thing, you reinforce the wrong movement pattern. So be very diligent and careful about how you do this step, and accumulate a bunch of practice jumping with straight arms. If you're not 100% sure that you're jumping with straight arms, then just keep doing it until it becomes a little bit more natural. And that might be 3 reps, it might be 50 reps, it might be 100,000 reps, whatever it is, but you just gotta keep practicing that, because you cannot move on to the next step in the teaching method until you know that you're jumping with straight arms. So once you're sure that you're jumping with straight arms and you've practiced it a bunch, the next thing is to add the rack. Now again, the rack is not the important part. Jumping with straight arms is the important part. So a couple of tips for adding the rack. If you start getting ahead of yourself and trying to rack the bar early, you're going to bend the elbows. So a couple of tips are to, number one, think about racking the bar on the way down, right? So you're gonna complete the jump with your arms straight. At the top of the jump, your arms are gonna be straight, you're gonna be tall. And then your elbows don't move until you are on the way down from the top of the jump. And your elbows only go forward, they don't go out, all right? So you're at the top of the jump here, elbows go forward and you rack the bar. Another thing you can think about is to rack the bar when your feet hit the floor, not before, all right? Now, all we're doing there is breaking up the jump and the rack. So it's not actually jump and rack, right? It's jump, then rack. It's jump, rack on the way down. It's jump, rack when your feet hit the floor. So it's just a way for you to break up those two movements and put a little bit of a mental block in there so that you're not trying to do them at the same time. And that's the fundamental problem, is trying to rack the bar at the same time that you're jumping. So it needs to be a jump first, then a rack. All right, so I'm gonna tell Bree to jump with straight arms a couple of times. Good. Feel the weight of the bar on your shoulders. Good. Now rack the bar on the way down. All right, hit the top of the jump with straight arms. Rack when your feet hit the floor. Do it again and rack it this time. There we go. Good, 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 good. All right. Now Bree doesn't have trouble with an arm pull, but if you do have trouble with an arm pull, again, if you miss the rack, it's okay. In fact, I want you to miss the rack, right? If you jump correctly with your arms straight, the rack will almost happen on its own. So don't get so caught up in trying to rack the bar that you start messing up the mechanics and the efficiency of the lift. So it's a jump with straight arms, hitting the top of the jump with straight arms, and then racking on the way down. You can time the feet with the elbow, and obviously that's not what happens, right? Something has to move. If you're gonna rack the bar when your feet hit the floor, something's gonna be moving in the meantime before your feet actually land. But again, if you think about racking when your feet hit the floor, you can time the elbows will be faster, and you'll delay the movement of the elbows just a tiny bit longer so that you can finish the pull with the arm straight. Okay, so, and you're gonna have to do that as many times as it takes. Another thing that you can do if you're struggling with it, so you start to add the rack and then you start to have trouble with it, is just if you're doing triples, do the first 2 reps without racking the bar. All right, so again, accumulating more practice, jumping with straight arms, and then making the rack a secondary consideration and not the primary consideration. So let's see that. This time, Bree, you're gonna jump. You're gonna do 2 reps. without racking the bar, and then you're going to rack every third one. If you've got 5 sets of 3 that you're going to do on this workout, maybe you do all 5 sets like this. You do the first 2 without racking, and then you rack the third one. Let's see it. Good. Rack it late, rack it late. There we go. Good. All right, relax. Put it down. All right, she's going to rest, and then she'll do the same thing, and maybe she'll do that for 5 sets of 3, and that's going to be her first workout if it's a problem, right? Or even if you're pulling it off the floor. Don't rack the bar until the 3rd rep of every set if you're having trouble with bending the elbows early. The other point at which you might want to start bending your elbows is trying to get the bar onto the mid-thigh. All right, so again, if you need to watch the teaching method series that we have on this before referring to this video. So if you haven't watched that, go back and watch that first. But one of the key points of this is touching the mid-thigh every time that you jump, every time that the bar leaves your thigh. Go ahead and go to the jump position. So one of the things that people will try to do is they'll bend the elbow, so start below the knee a little, and then as you're coming up, just kind of bend your elbows and put it at the, yeah, like that, right? So, or when she jumps, she'll pin the bar to the mid-thigh, so get in the jump position, good, and pin the bar there, and then, yeah, and then jump by bending your elbows. Yeah, exactly. So people will try to pin the bar to the mid-thigh, and then they'll let the elbows bend. So the other thing, and this is a relatively easy one, is when you jump, there's going to be some counter movement, right? There's going to be some counter movement when you jump. And counter movement, I mean, just when you go to jump, there's going to be a little bit of dip in the bar, and that's okay. So again, if the bar's hanging from the shoulders, and you're just letting these be chains or straps, then the bar can slide down a little bit. So focus right here on the jump position, Rusty, and beat the bar a little higher. Good. And then arms straight, go ahead and jump. Do it again. Bend your knees a little more. Good. Big jump. Good. And one more. So you can see the white spot there where the bar is leaving, and there's a little bit of counter movement there. Some of you will have a little bit more counter movement. It's okay. Let the bar just kind of slide up and down your legs. It's totally fine. You don't have to pin the bar to that spot and make your elbows bend when you do that. So arms are straight. If you do kind of like how an RDL, the bar slides down, you're not going to do an RDL where the bar goes all the way down, but I'm just saying that the bar can slide against the thighs a tiny bit as you do that counter movement. All right, and then the second part of this. So number 1 is jumping with the straight arm. So that's got to be the prerequisite. That's got to be the thing that you can do before you can move on to any other part of this. All right. So if you're having trouble with the elbow bend, don't even progress beyond this step until you get that down. Then the second thing to focus on is touching the mid-thigh. All right, especially as you start speeding the bar up off the ground, people tend to miss the mid-thigh, and that's the second most common issue we have with the power clean. So go ahead and pick up the bar, go to the jump position. So here's her, stand up. Here's her thigh, right? The bar's going to be somewhere about right there. That's not a precise like mathematical point. I don't need to get a ruler out and measure it. It's just enough to where when she bends her hips and her knees, it's about where she would be if she was going to do a vertical jump, right? So just kind of the best position to jump from. So go ahead and get into that jump position. All right, now your job is going to be to nail that spot somewhere in that range, somewhere in here every single time. Or more important, a better way to think about it is that the bar needs to touch the thigh before you jump or as you're jumping, okay? So in the next phase of the teaching method, start from below the knee, you slowly bring the bar up to the jump position, and then you jump and then rack on the way down. So do that real slow, Bree. Good, and notice that the bar touches the thigh right as she's jumping. Do it again. All right, now start from the mid-shin. A little sooner. That was late. Good. All right. And you've all seen this. If you watch the videos on the teaching method, you've seen this progression where we start at the jump position, go below the knee, and then go to the mid-shin, and we slowly bring the bar up. In case it's not perfectly clear, the purpose of that is to reinforce that touch position. Reinforce the bar touching the mid-thigh. So the bar has to touch that spot. Once again, if you are doing this and you find that you're consistently missing that touch point, or you're mysteriously like all of a sudden not racking the bar's looping all over the place, it's doing all kinds of weird stuff. Number one, make sure your start position is correct, but also make sure that you're touching the mid-thigh. And if you start running into problems with that, then again, you just back up into the teaching method like we did with the first part with the arm bend. So you start having trouble with touching the mid-thigh, then you're going to have to learn to reinforce that again. So go ahead and pick the bar up. And a way to do this, again, once you have already gone through the teaching method, this is kind of remedial stuff, right? So she's already learned how to do the clean, she's practicing it, and she starts running into trouble. So what you can do now is start from the hang position, all right, chest up, arms in, turn your elbows in, there we go, okay? And then you're gonna practice hitting the jump position from the hang, all right? So go down this time, and as soon as the bar touches the jump position, you're gonna jump and then rack it.
Go down.
Yeah, so you're gonna start here, you're gonna go like this, and then hit it. Exactly, yeah, now rack it. Good. Good. All right, now this time go down past the jump position to below the knee, then come back up and hit the jump position. Same thing, slow. Good. Come on up. Good. Do it again. Very good. Do one more. Good, and then this time mid-shin. So reach all the way down. Very nice. One more. Big jump, big jump, big jump. Very good. All right, good. So it's not much different from what you did during the teaching part of this when you learned it for the first time. The difference is that there's a little bit more movement, right? So you're starting from the top and then you're going down and up, then you're going past and then down and up, and then you're going past it all the way down to the floor and down and up. So again, it's remedial. So this isn't the way you want to do it initially when you're first learning this. But it's a way to get a little bit more movement, a little bit more speed. And you can do that as fast as you want and with as much weight on the bar as necessary to practice it at the right amount of stress, so to speak. So this isn't the way you're going to want to learn it. The way we have laid it out in the teaching progression is the best way to learn the touch position and to reinforce the touch position. This is just taking the specific part of the movement that you may be having trouble with, namely touching the mid-thigh, and adding a little bit of speed, adding a little bit of movement to it so that you can work just specifically on that problem. So by starting up high, you're lowering the bar to the touch position, then going, and then you're passing it up and then coming back to it. So some specific work for the mid-thigh touch position using that method. And then sometimes it might just be a matter of slowing down, right? If you're having trouble with touching the mid-thigh, you may just be going too fast. So provided that you know how to pull the bar off the floor, which it's assumed that you do, right? You know how to deadlift, you know how to do the 5-step setup, you know how to put the bar over the midfoot and arrange yourself around the bar, set your low back. Provided that all that stuff's good and set, the power clean is relatively simple beyond that. So if you can pull the bar off the floor, you need to learn how to accelerate the bar. You need to learn how to jump with your arms straight, and you need to learn how to touch the mid-thigh every single time. Those are your priorities, all right? Those are your priorities. The rack comes after these things, all right? Now, the rack is inherent in the movement. I understand that. You understand that. But in terms of practicing and learning this movement, the straight arms and the touch point at the mid-thigh have to take priority over racking the bar. So make sure you get those things straight in your head. Practice these drills if you need them, and see if it helps your power clean.